Good evening. Welcome to another episode of New England Horror Files podcast. Tonight, we're going to be discussing Bigfoot sightings in the New England region. And if I heard you correctly, Mary, we may even be getting a call from a Bigfoot himself later on tonight. Is that correct?
That's right, John. Sources tell me that we may, in fact, be getting a call from Bigfoot this evening.
Sources.
Amazing.
Sources. Interesting. Interesting. Well, we'll see if we have a call from Bigfoot. Let's see how that goes. I
The,
can
li-
neither confirm or deny at this point.
the lines are open, Mr. Sasquatch, and we are ready to receive your call.
We are ready to hear you. We want to hear your story. What's going on? What's what's happening in your life? What brought you
This is
here?
this is a safe space where you can talk to us, Mr. Sass.
This is a judgment-free zone.
Just
To all you
we won't. We,
Squatches, Yetis, Bigfoots, and other cryptids
we're not going to
Red lines
ask
are open.
where you've been or what you're running from. We're just here to listen. Okay.
God, that's so funny.
Shoot. So I think, and I know this was my experience, but when most people think of Bigfoot, they actually don't think of New England. They think of the Pacific North, right? Not
Right. Pacific
Pacific,
Northwest,
you
Montana,
know,
those
right?
really big areas out there.
Like the
Big,
bigger states.
the big states, not these tiny little
I mean,
populated fucking yeah.
Bigfoot in Rhode Island. Although Monster, who was the Bigfoot? Remember that Bigfoot show? They actually did a show in Rhode Island because there are a few sightings from encounter stories from Rhode Island. So I
I don't always
started
think of Rhode Island as having like wooded areas. I always just associate Rhode Island with the beach, the shore,
right. No, and you
and
don't
Providence.
think you don't and Providence, the beach and Providence.
Yep,
No,
that's it.
yeah, you don't think of Rhode Island as wooded, but it actually is. If I'm correct,
Probably,
I want to say.
I don't know what percentage. You tell. Yeah, you're looking it up. So
Let me actually look it up because I part of me wants to say 60, but I want to get the actual Forests of Rhode Island 2020. Rhode Island has an estimated 354,930 acres of forest land. It is 45% forested.
okay,
And this is from the U.S. Department of Agriculture, Forests of Rhode Island 2020. 69.72% of those are private, and 30.28 are state and local. Wow, lots of facts about Rhode Island forests here. Thanks a lot, USDA. Hey, this is cool. It's like a little chart. Like 0 acres of forest land are disturbed annually by fire. Although Rhode Island did just recently, I think within the past couple of years, have a pretty big fire. So you don't generally tend to think of forests in Rhode Island, but there is forest in Rhode Island. Most of the western side of the state is forested. I mean, people get lost in Acadia.
mm,
Sorry, is it Arcadia? I do this all the time.
I forget. Arcadia is Rhode Island,
Arcadia.
I think, and Acadia,
Yes,
Maine.
right. Arcadia is Rhode Island. Acadia is Maine.
Yeah, there's been a
Um,
lot of. There's been a lot. Like I've heard a lot of stories of UFO activity over there and that sort of thing.
mm,
There's a couple of stories on what on our that we did in our videos. Some of the shorts,
mm.
not the shorts, the like the Reddit compilations and whatnot.
Yeah, yeah.
People talking about that, some really creepy stuff. So maybe that's why they're going missing. Maybe it's the Bigfoot.
Maybe it's
Till
the
he
Bigfoot.
calls in and tells us the story, we're never gonna know. Pick
They
up
could
the
just
phone, Bigfoot.
let us know.
You know what the problem is? They don't have cell phones.
Yeah, but in the woods, there's like never cell phone service anyway. So
Hmm.
what's the point? It's just extra baggage.
Call us on a coconut. Can't hurt.
Or a string with the paper cups.
Oh yeah.
Uh, so yeah, like I think you tend to not think of Bigfoot being in this area or like any mention of Bigfoot in New England, but So there's a lot. There's more mention of this than you would think. Now, I started like my Bigfoot journey by accident. I've always heard of Bigfoot growing up. I mean, you remember Harry and the Hendersons, right?
Oh yeah,
That was like a staple when we were kids.
yeah.
I remember the younger kids when we lived down south many years ago. The younger kids would or the older kids would torment me and tease me about Bigfoot living in the swamp, and I would have nightmares about that. I actually did for a long time. Um, but I never thought like, oh yeah, Bigfoot is a real thing. It's just a thing that you grow up with talking about. And as I went along, and as I grew, I never considered them being in New England. I never even considered that it was actually like a potentially real thing
Hmm.
until I accidentally, like I said, I don't even remember how it started, but I remember I was working and I would put on things to listen to at work, and I just came across, I feel like it was actually Coast to Coast FM,
Hmm.
Coast to Coast AM,
Uh,
whatever it is.
yep.
And somebody was talking about Bigfoot encounters, and I was like, what are you talking about, Bigfoot? So I kind of looked into it more, and I started to find like different channels. And I remember very specifically I found some kind of hokey ones, and I was like, whatever, like this is still kind of like intriguing but hokey, whatever. Then I actually found Sasquatch Chronicles, and I was enthralled. I was like, this guy, it's actually a great channel if you ever get a chance to check it out. But he talks about, he interviews people. His name is Wes. I unfortunately forget his last name, um, but he interviews people from everywhere. He's got people telling stories from all over the country, and he's himself trying to figure it out. Like, because on the one hand, it's such a legend and a lore. It's folklore to talk about Bigfoot, but everyone knows who it is. There's stories about Bigfoot from all over the country, all over the world. There's different names for it, but
Mm.
it, it's legitimately like it's a household term. So we all know it, but at the same time, nobody thinks it's real. But yet there's a metric fuck ton of encounter stories that are incredibly compelling.
Yeah.
Like, these people, when you listen to these people tell their stories, I mean, the way they tell them, it's like some of them want to remain anonymous. They don't want people to know because they don't want to be ridiculed, which is a huge theme. Um, it's almost like it's taboo to say that you're open minded about it. And I mean, I'll be honest, I sometimes feel crazy trying to, even because I'm just trying to figure it out. I'm like, all right, I hear these encounter stories, I see these reports. I myself have experienced a good amount of things that I'm like, what was that? you know,
Hmm.
um, that I can't necessarily otherwise explain in different settings, different states, even different areas. Um, we've heard sounds in Arcadia, nothing crazy, but like we've heard sounds. I've heard a lot of things, and like I've had some experiences that are like, well, I don't really know how to explain that. So then there's a whole bunch of other ones, so like I think it's an interesting thing to question and to look into, especially if like you're coming from the place of like, no, that's just legend, right? But then why are there so many people talking about it, and
Of
why do
course.
these,
Yeah.
you know what I mean? Like, why does it go back so far into history where we have a lot of Native American folklore and legends also in the same sort of discussion carrying down from there? And then there's a lot of older, kind of like, I don't know, from like the 1800s, 1700s. There's reports and things, you know. And I think you tend to not think about it in New England, but there's definitely a wealth of stuff from New England, right?
For sure. For sure. Um, yeah, it's interesting you mentioned that. Like this, but this like prominent folklore, but at the same time, Like a lot of people just don't believe it. If you actually talk about it, like, oh, I saw a Bigfoot, or I ran over a Bigfoot, like, not really going to be received very well.
No,
Sidebar, sidebar, and I can't prove this, but I think that I invented the term metric fuck ton. No word of a lie.
what?
No, I mean, I didn't hear it anywhere else. I didn't hear it from anybody. I was the first person that I ever heard say it. Now, it's not to say that nobody else in California or Texas or Wisconsin didn't say the same thing. But I didn't hear it from anybody else. So as far as I'm concerned, I invented it.
I don't think I heard it from you though.
Well, maybe not.
Hold on. See, now I'm thinking about this. Now I'm wondering. Let's put a pin in that, because now I'm gonna.
That's a total sidebar.
I'm like,
we don't need to spend any more time on this.
Now let's put a pin in that, and we'll come back to that. Yeah. All right. So as I started to hear these stories, right? So this goes back several years. I started to kind of wonder, and I'm going to be very clear that I don't have an opinion, because I just don't have an opinion yet. I'm very open to, and we've kind of touched on this I think we talked about this just a tad in our Dogman video, or Dogman podcast that we did. I don't totally know. I feel like the concept, while everybody who talks about it says that generally Bigfoot are, I don't know, there's different schools of thought. I actually can't say that all across the boards they say that they're just benevolent and, none of them are dangerous. I don't know that that's totally the case, so I don't want to say that, but I personally find the concept of Bigfoot absolutely terrifying.
I mean, even if they were a bunch of like hippie stoners living in the woods, like, hey, man.
I don't know. Look, I live in Vermont, okay?
That, if anywhere, that's where. Yeah, that sounds like what the Vermont Bigfoot would be like.
Like, sure. Wait a minute. Hold on.
Wow, chill out, bro.
Yeah, man. So I always think about, so like I said, I used to have bad dreams about Bigfoot as a kid, and it was always so terrifying. And so I guess maybe I still carry some of that over, but like, can you imagine being in the forest? What? Imagine being in the woods, like say you're camping or whatever, and like you see a freaking Sasquatch. I mean, what must that be freaking like? Like, I've had experiences, but I've never seen anything. Well, that's not entirely true. I haven't exactly, well, and the thing that I did see in the moment, I'm going back in my brain to how it felt. Honestly, I felt like, all right, I'm going to get in the car now and we're going to leave. Where did it go? We're going to go. That's it. We're leaving. That's how I felt in the moment. It was like a freeze. I kind of froze. I saw something that I can't explain in the Freetown State Forest. Of course it was in Freetown.
Of course.
Why not? let's every weird thing that can happen to one. It'll happen in Freetown.
There's a weird party going on and everyone's invited.
Freetown State Forest. Oh my God. We should do a
well, yeah,
a tourism video for Freetown with all the crazy shit that is happening. All right. I'll get to that story later. Let's get into kind of a brief history of Sasquatch in New England. So there's definitely, I think there's like 31,000 square miles of um, land area in New England, and then New England is right next to upstate New York, and then Pennsylvania. Pennsylvania has a good amount of encounter stories also. I mean, virtually every state does. Um, but if you think about the area, a lot of people think that New England's not a hospitable place for Sasquatch. But if you think about northern Maine, northern New Hampshire, even, and most of Vermont, I mean, Vermont has a population of almost 500,000. It's not very much. It's a small state, but there's areas of just like vast. There's
Nothing. Yeah.
yeah, there really
That's what
is.
I like about it out there. Honestly, that's why I like visiting.
No, yeah, it is.
It's
It's
not people.
very no, and there's areas where I mean, in the Green Mountains, you can go. We went camping in the Green Mountains a couple times, and every time it's like once you get up onto the mountains and like at a little bit of a higher elevation, it gets so quiet that you can hear. It's almost like you can. It's the weirdest sensation or experience. You can hear for miles. Almost, it feels like you can hear for miles. That's
Hmm.
that's how quiet it gets and how vast
That's
the
crazy.
area. No, it is. It's a very weird, or it's a very interesting. I like it. It's very cool, but it's also it's kind of a very alien feeling if you're not used to it.
Right.
Um, yeah, and I mean, there's places where, I mean, yeah, there's definitely tons of you can drive to a lot of places, in the mountains, but there's also places that are just so remote that like, it's miles away from anywhere. It's miles from the nearest house, and it's all wooded, and it's mountainous, and it's not like you're just gonna stroll through here. So
Yeah.
and it's yeah, and there's tons of foliage and wildlife, and I mean deer, bear. There's a magnificent amount of bear in, I'm not sure about Maine, but Vermont and New Hampshire for sure. I mean, every time, I can't tell you, I was working today and I pull into an area, and it's off of I think it's a state road, like a state, not a highway. It's a 2 lane kind of highway, but it's not really a highway, but it's a thoroughfare, but it's still traveled. It's well traveled. I pull off this road into a dirt road, and right there is one of the biggest does I've seen in a long time, just in the trees. And I'm like, oh, that's right. There's so much wildlife here. It's crazy.
Yeah.
We've seen bear. I mean, there's bear everywhere. So the terrain and habitat could definitely, you know, support Bigfoot. I don't see why it couldn't. And Bigfoot are said to. You got to think about a creature who is. Let's just go with it that Bigfoot is totally legit and exists as a creature in America. They've been here. I mean, how long? Hundreds of thousands of years, I'd imagine. I mean, for a long time, they're very well adapted to their environment, and they don't have. I mean, we've polluted the hell out of this planet, but they're living on like the cleanest diet. Do you know what I mean? Like they're
Yeah.
not, like they talk about the dinosaurs and how the dinosaurs had more oxygen and things like that, so they were bigger and stronger and all that stuff. It was a very oxygenated environment. It was just much healthier.
Dinosaurs
Imagine.
didn't know how good they had it.
I know, seriously. Fucking A. It wasn't their
Fucking
fault.
fucking dinosaurs.
See, we grew up with dinosaurs too. Land Before Time was definitely my thing. So
Yeah.
anyhow, so these are creatures that you know, they're really in good shape. It's kind of running up a mountainside is probably not a big deal. I mean, I'm not doing it, but for the Sasquatch, it's not a
Sasquatch
big.
is.
I mean, Sasquatch is kicking all our asses with that stuff. Um,
Oh yeah.
yeah. So, um, when you get into like some of the historical um, legends, there's definitely, I mean, we've got some from New Hampshire, we've got some legends from Vermont. They're called different things, but I do know that there are a lot of um, Bigfoot stories out of Maine. I mean, it's pretty crazy. Where to even begin with that? So, in a very general sense, you have discussions about them being in at least Vermont, New Hampshire, and Maine. Um, oh, here it is. The book is called Bigfoot in Maine. Duh. I'm shocked. All right, there's also Shadows in the Woods, A Chronicle of Bigfoot in Maine. These are just some of the books about, and there's a ton of books about Vermont also. We did a video, well, not really a video. We read, or you read, the from Joseph Citro's book. From it's called the chapter's called Vermont's Hidden Population, and it's about a Bigfoot, a photo that is purported to be Bigfoot, but it was a very not controversial but famous photo.
Mm-hmm.
So if you wanted to check that out, but also Joseph Citro writes a lot about Bigfoot in Vermont. Jeez, see. So yeah, so we've got the Shy Man of New Hampshire, Slippery Skin, as he was called in Vermont. Hold on, so I'm reading, getting my head together. The Legend of Slippery Skin. Bear, Bigfoot, or Native American. So actually, this comes from Vermont Maturity Magazine. I'm not sure when, October 2022, and they go through Slippery Skin and so in the 1700s, the Northeast Kingdom of Vermont was pretty barren frontier. I mean, it still is. It was no, not much has changed. I mean, it's beautiful country, but it is very. I mean, it's frontier. There are areas of it that are just uninhabited, sparsely populated, things like that. So legend has had it that it was the home of this Slippery Skin, a bear, which was supposed to have caused great dis-ease among the people who did live there.
He's a bear.
He's a bear. The natives called him Wujuk, or Wet Skin, because he managed to elude every single trap that was set for him.
Whoa.
And I what's that?
He's smart. He knows they're setting traps. He knows how to think around them.
He's wicked smart.
Yeah,
so I guess he would terrorize the cattle and sheep, push over wood piles, throw rocks, throw logs. The earliest report was from 1759. They were being annoyed for no reason by a large black bear who would throw large pine cones and nuts from the trees and ledges. And this is where they referenced the Indians who called him Wet Skin. And he continued to harass people just forever. Like it never went away. So that's,
imagine living in the rural, like 1700s, 1800s Vermont, and like constantly getting harassed by Bigfoot, as well as all the other problems of life you have.
And then there's, winter.
And, some of us might die throughout the winter.
Thanks a lot, Bigfoot.
And
like
I have to get
fucking
carrots.
Right. Bigfoot
What the
harassing
fuck?
the cattle, and I only have 5 cattle to make it through till March. Great. Goodness gracious. Yeah, exactly. Exactly. That's the thing. Like when like we were talking about in Dudleytown, that I will say that that area of Connecticut is not well, I don't want to say it's not that different, but like it's got some similarities to the Northeast Kingdom in some ways. I mean, it's very mountainous, rolling, farmland. There's a humongous bear population in that area. I mean, I looked at the numbers one year and was like, holy crap! There's so many bears in eastern Connecticut. You just wouldn't think it. And if you go there, like it's just the tri-state area. If you where Massachusetts, Connecticut, and New York meet up, is my God, it's like that whole area is just like wicked wooded.
Yeah, it really
It's
is.
rolling and there's rivers and mountains and waterfalls. It's like it's when you think of Massachusetts or even Connecticut, you don't really think about those areas. At least I didn't. But once you go into like the Berkshires or that northwest corner of Connecticut, I mean, it's very wild. And so imagine back in the day before there was you know, any sort of buildup. And when we're talking about Dudleytown and how these people were like terrified, like I wonder why,
Yeah.
This is if this stuff was going on in Vermont. I do know that there are, reports. We'll get to BFRO reports later, but there are BFRO reports from the Dudleytown area, and how long did that go on? People hearing Bigfoots or wild cats, whatever. I mean, that's crazy. So in this north slippery
Northeast
skin.
slippery skin.
Goodness gracious. They call him a bear, but I mean, often bear is used to describe a wild man sort of creature. He's described as mean, holding a grudge against human, destroyed fences, ripped up things, frightened the animals, ruined crops, and just kept like harassing and like just causing all sorts of trouble. Um, he was a huge bear, but never ran on his or only ran on his hind legs and never on all fours. So what the hell does that? What bear does that? Like, so he was very quick, and that's what they often say about Bigfoot is that he is very quick, can run very quickly. So this is a story from this article from Maidstone, which is a town in Vermont. I wouldn't call it a town, but it's a town. Maidstone was the scene in the very early days of numerous depredations by an old bear known as Slippery Skin. Nastiness was to him a pleasurable activity, according to the contemporary accounts. Filling sap buckets with rocks, throwing barbed wire into hay rakes, and mowing machines were commonplace amusements with him. I feel like a bear doesn't do things like that. But anyway, there is a story
Bear
that
would never do that.
bears, I mean, bears are nuts. Don't get me wrong. These black bears are crazy and they can do all sorts of things, but like,
I think they're like deceiving the fucking townsfolk.
yeah, I don't feel like they're doing that. Maybe they're like, hey, look at this car that someone left some granola bars in. Sure. But I mean, like, maliciously, I don't know. Is it really a bear? Huh. There is a story that Governor Jonas Galusha had a reputation as an excellent hunter, declared one time during an election that he would rout out Slippery Skin from the northern Vermont woods once and for all. He claimed to have a plan which he had never tried before. A party of men led by the governor came up to Maidstone, where the old bear had been reported seen only the previous day, stealing a ham out of a smokehouse, pushing over haystacks, and doing sundry other damages. Upon arrival, the governor produced a bottle of ointment and proceeded to soak himself with it. It was, he said, the scent of a female bear, and was his plan which had never been tried before. The governor then loaded his gun and went into the woods. That's some balls, huh?
Okay.
So, Governor loads his gun, goes into the woods. Shortly thereafter, he came running out of the woods towards the hunting party with Slippery Skin right behind him. "Out of my way, boys," shouted the governor. "I'm bringing him back alive." Whereupon the entire party scattered in haste for safety. Consequently, no one shot the bear. The governor lost the election that year, and his plan that had never been tried before was never tried again. So, like,
One time only.
I wonder why. Oh my gosh. When is it? Doesn't actually give a year. Hold on. When is this from? Governor Jonas. Oops. Galusha, Vermont. I don't know when this was. Let's look it up. He was the sixth and eighth governor of Vermont, and he was born 1753, died in 1834. So this was like early 1800s, I imagine. He was born in Norwich, Connecticut, and migrated to Shaftesbury, Vermont, which is on the near Bennington. Again, another area that's very so the Green Mountains in Vermont basically run up like kind of the middle of the state, but very particularly down near like the southwest corner. It's like most of that section is just like woods, mountains. You know, that's where the famous Glastonbury Mountain is, and there's a famous actually a alleged Bigfoot account from that area too, from the 1800s. There was I forget who talked about this. There was a stagecoach of people, and they're in the rain. It's pouring rain as they're traveling, and this out of nowhere the horses get spooked, and this huge creature crosses the road in front of them at some point, and it was just terrifying to them. Which of course, but this is in that same area where Governor Galusha's homestead marker is. Shaftesbury, Vermont. So I wonder if that's where, although that's not in the Northeast Kingdom. But what's interesting to me as I'm reading this is that back in the day, somebody from the opposite side of the state would know about a situation going on in the Northeast Kingdom, which is the opposite of the state. It's just interesting to think about. Moving right along. Where did it go? So another story about this slippery skin comes from Morgan, Vermont. Same idea. Just a whole bunch of stuff. Westmore. Westmore is where Lake Willoughby is. If you've never been to Lake Willoughby, I suggest you make a mecca there. It's an amazing sacred place. But let me read this about
Sacred place?
Yeah, it's a spring-fed lake, and I think what is it? Is it the deepest lake in Vermont? What is? I always forget this. I don't know why I could never get my head out of my ass and remember what it is about Lake Willoughby that makes it so amazing. It's either the deepest or the longest. It's Vermont's deepest lake, yeah. Carved by glaciers, and it's pretty cool because it's got these mountains on either side of it, and it's very long and thin. There's a north beach and a south beach, and then there's like a road that goes alongside it, and you can hike to the top of, I believe it's Mount Pisgah. But there's something very magical about Lake Willoughby. It's hard to describe it, but it's very cold. It's very clear. It's magical. It's the waters have I don't know. It's like I said, it's spring fed. So it's very cold, but I don't know. It's just a gorgeous, amazing place, and it's in the Northeast Kingdom. And I'm actually interested in what the story is from there. Oh, great. Well, the story, I guess, it's not a nice story at all. Story is that in Westmore, a group of German clergymen were picnicking on the shore of Lake Willoughby one day when they were suddenly set upon by the bear Slippery Skin, who wreaked havoc and fear upon the settlers. They retreated swiftly into the woods. A short while later, one was reported missing, and the authorities found a mutilated body in the underbrush. Later, it was determined that the body was actually the mangled remains of what? Later, it was determined that the body, quote unquote, was actually the mangled remains of several cheese strudels, which had been part of the clergyman's picnic. What the hell kind of story is this? The missing clergyman was later found alive and well. Knock it off, cat.
Turns out it was just fucking pastries.
What did they think? Wait a minute. All right, hold on. Wow, this story escalated quickly. I had more. I have questions. So wait a minute, because at first I was like, "Oh my god, they found his body in the," because I kind of like skimmed over this before I read the whole thing, and then I was like, "Oh god, they found his body. He was never found." Like, holy shit, that's not cool. Then I'm imagining like this happening on the shores of Lake Willoughby, and I'm like, "Oh god, it's cursed," you know. Then I'm like, "Wait a minute, what?" What? How did they mistake cheese strudels for a body? The missing clergy.
Unfortunate cheese strudel incident.
It's a young man. Oh my god. The missing clergyman was later found alive and well, it is said, in Chicopee, Massachusetts. What did he just like? You know what? I'm out of here. Fuck these guys. And just left the team. Like,
Like you could go anywhere you want. Why would you go to Chicopee,
it
Massachusetts?
goes to Chicopee, Massachusetts.
What the fuck?
Why would you leave Lake Willoughby to go to Chicopee? Oh my god. All right, well, that's
The nation was new. He was exploring.
Yeah, it was a new place. Oh my god. What the hell? All right. So another story. Oh my god. Another story comes to us from New England Folklore, blogspot.com. And this is a great website, by the way. But this is the Winstead Wild Man. And this was before there was Bigfoot, there was the Wild Man. So this is a story from Winstead, Connecticut, and Winstead, Connecticut is, I believe, let's get this map in front of my eyeballs. I know that it's in the north. Wait. Yep, that's exactly where I thought it was. So, Winstead, of course, it's in the northwest corner of Connecticut. This is like, I mean, I'm looking at the map here. I'm just trying to get a sense of how close this is to Dudleytown. Back to Dudleytown, Cornwall. I'm going to say this is within an hour away from it's. I don't even think it's an hour. I'm being very. Yeah, so from the Winstead that we're about to talk about the story of the Winstead Wild Man in Connecticut, it's probably an hour. It's an hour driving or less, but as the crow flies, it's actually less. But this area is funky because, like I said, it's all like mountainous and rolling, you know, hills and things. So it's the way you would drive is not the way Bigfoot would walk. So, where did the story go? Oh no. Where'd you go? All right, so just for reference, so this is from summer 1891. People riding a coach through Winstead, Connecticut, see a large animal run across the highway and leap over a fence. It stands on two legs. The passengers think it may be a gorilla. The New York Times speculates it is a gorilla that escaped from a circus several years ago and was sighted in nearby South Norfolk the previous winter. However, the Times also notes that some Winstead residents think that it might be a wild man known to live in the area. All right, so we've got some options. September 1891, a Mrs. Culver of Colebrook, a town near Winstead, frantically reports that the wild man/gorilla spent the night sleeping on her porch. 6 police and many civilians searched the area, but nothing is found. August 1895, a few years later, Winstead Selectman Riley Smith is out picking berries with his dog in Colebrook when he sees the wild man emerge from a clump of bushes. The wild man, who yelled loudly as he ran past Smith, is described as a large man, stark naked and covered with hair all over his body. Both Smith and his dog were terrified and fled the area. Ooh, another stagecoach. August 1895. So these are like the 1895 August week, 21st, 23rd, and the 25th. Um, Passengers on the coach through Winstead once again see the wild man on the isolated road between Winstead and Colebrook. The North Adams transcript reports that the wild man may be one of several who were seen in the area several years earlier, and that farmers in the area believe the wild man is stealing their small livestock. The transcript also notes that a large hunting party is being planned for Sunday, August 25th. So, August 25th, 1895, 200 armed men searched the area around Winstead and Colebrook for the wild man. Oh, they find a cave on the Beardsley farm that contains fresh bones and one old shoe. Footprints of bare feet were found outside the cave, which was located about 3 miles from where Riley Smith encountered the wild man. The wild man himself is not seen. Some people suggest the wild man is really a local man who known to be suffering from alcohol withdrawal, but the man doesn't meet the description of the person seen by Smith. Also on the 25th, picnickers find a small isolated cabin and report it to the authorities. It is revealed to be the home of Mort Pond, a known hermit. So, these go on. There's descriptions. Clearly a gorilla. Large white teeth, black hair, muscular form, is about 6.5 feet tall.
Gorilla.
I don't know if gorillas are 6.5.
Probably.
The Norfolk gorilla was sealed inside a cave by local citizens who covered the entrance with chains, but it broke the chains and escaped. It was also impervious to being shot with birdshot. More sightings throughout the time. These materials came from a book called The Historical Bigfoot, which compiles hundreds of old newspaper articles about wild men, gorillas, and other hairy humanoids. Lots of accounts from Connecticut, like I said, and it's funny, we were just talking about, there's a article, it's very recent, from November of 2024. Stop it. Don't rub against the chair and blink at me, kitty. Leave my sweater alone. I'll show you Bigfoot. All right, so the headline of this article is Bigfoot sighted in Connecticut. Again. Again. This is hilarious because, I've seen and I don't have them all, but I've seen several newspaper articles where they talk about this article. Let me read this article because this talks about it too. Yeah. Fairfield County. What?
Sorry, go ahead.
This is Fairfield County. Bigfoot sighted in Connecticut again. November 7th, 2024. Monroe, Connecticut. He's hairy, walks on 2 legs, as has been sighted in one of Connecticut's Sasquatch hotspots again. A Bigfoot was heard in Monroe last year, according to a report published by the Bigfoot Field Research Organization this summer. The report is classified as a Class B sighting. Howls were heard after midnight on October 17, 2023, in a forested area between Botsford and Upper Stepney, according to the first-hand account. The screaming / long-duration whooping went on for between 5 and 10 minutes.
Whoa.
Right? It was not a bobcat or fox or coyote, the report reads. I live out west, California, to be specific, and I'm well acquainted with coyotes, bobcats, and cougars and their vocalizations. This voice had quite a bit of power behind it, and I could tell that it was carried over a distance. Afterward, all the dogs in the area started barking, and the howls went silent. All right. So Litchfield County has had 11. Middlesex and New London counties have had 3 each. Hartford has recorded 1. And Windham County has reported 1 sighting. New Haven and Tallinn counties have never had a sighting. that's been reported to the organization. However, the organization notes that many witnesses ask for their sightings not to be posted online. Only reports that have been investigated are posted. Hartford County last had a sighting in 2018, according to a report published in 2022. Litchfield County's last sighting was in 2022, Middlesex in 2019, New London in 2019, and Wyndham last reported seeing a Bigfoot in 2009. So this is really interesting because Connecticut is like the southernmost New England state.
It's also
It's
the
right.
shittiest New England state by far. Sorry,
What?
Connecticut, but
It's the
let's
what?
start calling it what it is.
Did you say the shittiest New England state?
I said it's also the shittiest New England state by far.
Uh,
Get your
I
shit
mean,
together, Connecticut.
I think Massachusetts has had its moments, but depends
Massachusetts
how.
definitely has its moments, but it at least has like cool things about it. A lot of things about Massachusetts suck, but it has a couple cool things. Like Boston sucks, but it's also a great city. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like
Yeah. Right.
the Cape is really cool. The Cape is really nice.
That's true.
Even I think like Bristol County, Norfolk County, a lot of that stuff is kind of like, kind of like nice places to live. You know what I mean? Like nice towns with like a good balance of like good scenery and that sort of thing.
Right.
Out west toward like Worcester's kind of like but it's it's all right. But then you have like the Western Mass has its appeal with like the mountains and the more like spread outness of it. So I don't know. Connecticut's just like, geez, we have to fucking run an article because Bigfoot wanted to be here. It's just like, congratulations, Connecticut. Someone wants to be there. It's just a Bigfoot. Congratulations.
At least Bigfoot showed up. I just feel like the eye rolling with this headline, and it's so funny to me. Bigfoot sighted in Connecticut again. Dad, Bigfoot's outside again.
Right? Bigfoot again.
Oh my God, Connecticut, Bigfoot's here. So, but this is these sightings. Like it's just so. BFRO, Bigfoot Field Research Organization, is like a they'll like take in your reports. Like if you see something or you see what you think are footprints, or you hear something that you think is, or you see whatever, and they log it. So they also take some of the like the newspaper articles from back in the day, and they just catalog it. And it's all, I believe it's all volunteer. So it's like, you kind of get what you get, but like they said,
right.
Not all of them are published online. Some of them do get investigated. I actually know that there is a guy in Vermont who does a lot of research. I'm not sure what honestly, I haven't checked in on him in a couple of years, so I'm not sure what he's doing currently. But his name is Christopher Noel, and he does like a lot of very interesting research and like, trying to figure it out. So go check him out. He does some interesting things.
Yeah, so we're gonna wrap up with a little Reddit story here that we thought was interesting. So it's the wild people of New Hampshire, my personal account. I grew up in a small town in rural New Hampshire. I'm 67 now, 2022. The following events happened sometime in the early 1960s. The Patterson film hadn't come out yet. The words Sasquatch and Bigfoot were not part of any New Hampshire residents' vocabulary, and there were no rumors of anything unusual in the woods. But as it turns out, there were certain people there who were well aware there were such creatures living wild right there in the Granite State. So I recall that at some point when I was still in grammar school, my mother took me and my younger sister over to the house of an old woman who lived next to a lake in our town that was popular for swimming, and which had many summer cottages around it. I don't remember who this woman was. It was the first and only time we ever visited her. It was a summer morning. I think my mother only brought us along because there was no convenient babysitter. Once we got there, it became clear she wanted to talk to this woman alone. The adults, my mother and this woman, ate in her kitchen, and we kids were shunted to the living room to watch TV with cookies and milk. I could hear that this woman and my mother were having a lively conversation in her kitchen, but I couldn't hear any details over the cartoons. I scarfed my cookies down and sat a long time wanting more, but was hesitant to ask since this woman was a total stranger to me. Finally, I caved into my cravings, and as I walked into the kitchen holding the empty cookie plate like Oliver Twist on his way to ask for more, the woman was saying something about a guy who ended up not being able to use the land he bought. It struck me as unfair. Having no manners to speak of, I interrupted and said, "Wait, why couldn't he use the land he bought?" "Because they were already living there," she said. "They? Who?" I asked. Even at that age, I knew it was fishy that people would be living in the land they didn't own. "Wild people," she informed me, apparently completely serious. I paused and wondered what the hell wild people were. What came to mind was something like the Beverly Hillbillies, who, the show taught us, were not completely civilized people. They got everything wrong and misinterpreted the modern world. Wild people must mean something like that, but maybe a few degrees worse. "Wild people?" I asked. "Wild people," she repeated. Again, all that suggested to me was barefoot guys who lived in the woods making moonshine and shooting revenues.
I don't.
Revenues. I don't even. It was a cartoon concept to me. Will Abner. We had an incompletely we had an incompletely civilized guy like that in town. He was a really bad alcoholic who lived by himself in a tar paper shack out in the woods. He was always dirty and smelled really bad. If you imagined him a couple notches worse, he'd qualify for the label wild man. So I asked, why don't they just arrest them, get them off the guy's land? "Because they're not like us," she said. "They speak a different language. They don't even wear clothes, and they could never learn our ways. When we first realized they were there, we decided to leave them be. We have a man who could communicate with them, and there's a kind of deal we made with them that we'll leave them alone if they leave us alone. If you saw what they look like, you'd know they could never be civilized." That man knew when he bought the land, he was told. He couldn't use it for anything because they were already living there. But I guess he didn't believe it until it was too late. "Not like us. What do they look like?" "They're like, well, they're more like apes than we are. They're like an in between apes and us. They're very hairy, all over their bodies. They're like, what's that word?" she asked my mother. At first, she couldn't think of it. Then she found it. "The missing link. That's it. The missing link. They're like the missing link between apes and men." I asked a couple more penetrating questions, but I had already decided not to believe the story. It had to be one of those fictions adults tell children because they don't think they're ready for the real story. Or worse, maybe because the person telling the story is more or less crazy. We kids knew what a crazy person was. One of our neighbors was an old man who had long conversations with disembodied voices no one else could hear. Now, on the drive back home, I asked my mother why we had gone over there. She said it was because she had seen something one night while driving and had called the police about it. The police had given her this woman's number, told her to call her, and she would explain to her what she had seen. I asked her what she had seen. She said she saw a hairy, naked man standing on the side of the road. Apparently, he kind of froze in the headlights as she came around a bend, so she got a fairly good look at him, then turned around and stepped up to the embankment behind him and walked away into the woods. "Hairy, naked man" sounded to me like some guy had gotten really drunk at a party, took off his clothes, started walking around outside on the roads. In other words, it seemed like not such a big deal. I asked my mother about what she'd seen again the next day, and she added that it seemed to have very dark skin, such that her first thought was that it was a Negro. Stories from the 1960s. And that he seemed really tall, such that her second thought was that it was a certain Mr. Blank, the tallest man in town, guy who was 6'9", painted a dark color with her hair glued on his body, out on his way to pull a prank on someone. Didn't sound like something he'd ever do. My older sister came in at that point, heard the last bit, and asked what she was talking about. She said something like, "That thing I saw driving home the other night." My mother had already told her about it. My sister smiled and said very sarcastically, "Oh yeah, you saw a naked, hairy man." Upon being mocked, my mother kind of crumbled and muttered, "Oh, I don't know what I saw. I don't want to talk about it anymore." She never did. None of us did. We all stuffed the incident into the back of our mental closets and left it there. So it seems to me that what's most remarkable here is not the Bigfoot sighting, which is pretty unexciting as such sightings go. It's the fact that there seems to have been a group of people living in my hometown at that time who were well aware of them and who had to deal with the local cops, such that the cops would refer anyone who called them with reports of naked, hairy people to someone in this group for an explanation. This woman and her group weren't trying to educate the public in general about them. They were quietly informing people on a need-to-know basis, ostensibly in order to preserve the peace between wild people and humans. I've never heard of anything like this in any other Bigfoot account.
That's crazy.
Right?
That's really interesting. Call the cops. Or like, here, call this lady. Interestingly, in the comments, somebody says, a fellow New Hampshire resident here, I can also attest to this. And someone says you're attesting to having heard stories of the Coos County Wood Devils, which is a thing in New Hampshire. And they respond with, I'm attesting to growing up in New Hampshire and still living there and hearing stories of wild men from elders my whole life. That's really interesting.
Yeah.
There's a lot of these comments. I believe there's also New Hampshire here. The Abenaki and other local native cultures here could also probably fill in some gaps of the tale we have here. They have stories of them also. They called them something that translates roughly to shy man of the woods. They also speak of brokering a sort of peaceful, if not uninvolved, coexistence. As far as I know, the stories become more prevalent as you get farther north and to less historically developed areas of the state, but they preserve in nearly every county. If I remember correctly, there is a man on YouTube in northern New Hampshire who preserves the myth and also purports to being observing a community of them. Take that for what you will. There actually is, and I can't remember his name, but I have seen that. But there's a whole story about it. It's very interesting. Someone commented more recently, this post is a few years old, but someone commented that, I know this is an old post and I know you aren't going to give out details, but I live in the Monadnock region and have to throw out a couple guesses based on things I've heard. My first guess is Spotsford/Chesterfield, and my second is Winchester. The Pisgah area in general, really, and if I'm wrong, there may be more wild people in that area.
Yeah.
Oh, hold on. Wait. Erase that because I thought this guy said that. Okay. So the OP comes in and says he says that he will say that the town that he's talking about is in the Monadnock region, and that's as specific as he's going to get. Which is interesting because Mount Monadnock is like the most hiked mountain in the Northeast or something. It might be the most hiked mountain in America. It's like a famous mountain. It's like this random ass, Monadnock means it's translated to like mountain that comes out of nowhere. And it kind of is, but it's a very
mountain.
Yeah, it's just like, oh look, there's that mountain. It gets hiked a lot and it's a very popular mountain to hike. And this isn't far. It's like just east of Brattleboro. It's not very far. It's like the Keene, Brattleboro area. That's the Monadnock region. Well, Brattleboro's Vermont, but so it's when you think about like where that is, that's not that far. That's not far north at all. I mean, Keene is 30 minutes from the Massachusetts border. It's just very interesting to think that it's right there, But when you really look at the geography of these places, just south of Keene is, the Wachusett area in Massachusetts anyway. These are wooded areas. They're Monadnock is mountainous. It's not mountainous like the Green Mountains or even the White Mountains. It's a little bit different, but it's definitely some area there. It's a little squatchy, as they say. So
That is where the Squatches live.
yeah. So
Interesting story.
yeah, a lot of these, and we barely scratched the surface. I mean, I feel like we could literally do a part 2, 3, and 4 of this because, and maybe we should do a part 2 because we haven't even gotten into the BFRO reports or. I haven't shared any of my experiences. Go figure. I went a whole episode without sharing an actual experience. Mm-hmm. So I think I don't know. I find it, like I said, I've always found this compelling.
Actually, not true. You did share an experience earlier.
No, I didn't.
You did.
I started to.
Yeah, you said you heard a sound and you kind of like left. Sounds like an experience to me.
Gosh darn it. No. Oh, I did. I did say in Arcadia. Episode. I'll try again next time. Good luck.
Part of the show.
Yeah, whatever. I mean, there's not too many places I can go and actually share the crazy shit I've experienced. So, whatever. All right. So I don't know. I don't. Even towards the end here now, I'm kind of like, it's interesting. It's very interesting to think about.
Okay.
Especially when you learn that there are plenty of encounters from New England.
Yeah, there's a lot. Well, the thing too is most people aren't that deep in the woods to know anything about anything. Like,
right? That's true.
Probably not gonna run into anything like this unless you're like hiking. You're in a very remote area. Maybe you're like in some sort of like hunting cabin, or you're at like an Airbnb in the mountains, or on a lake, or something like that. Or like you just live in an area like that. Like it's just like to the woods, and maybe you see something.
Once you leave the more crowded areas of southern New England,
it just gets so more it just gets so much more peaceful. It's just frolic among the birds and the butterflies. It's amazing. It's beautiful.
It's like I just found my slice of paradise in the great up north.
I'm never going to return to the 9-to-5 world. Anyway, these Sasquatches got the right idea. I'll tell you what.
Look, I'm telling you what. My gosh, they don't have bills. There's no like car payments or mortgages. They don't have to work.
Well, thanks for reminding me.
Sorry.
Anyway, we should wrap up.
Yeah, we should. All right. So on that note, like, listeners, what do you think? I mean, feel free to share your thoughts in the comments. I mean, I'm dead serious.
Comments. Send us an email about your stories. Like, we want to hear it. We want to hear this stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Hear the first-hand accounts. I mean, we're reading Reddit stories. I mean, it's weird. I want to say like Reddit's not reliable, but at the same time, I feel like if you're like, there's subs for like fiction stories. There's subs for like writing prompts and like, you know, practice essays and just different types of like fictional writing.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so like, and then there's subs for true encounters. So I'm like, I tend to think like people for the most part aren't going to be posting bullshit in the real ones.
Right. Yeah, and this is from the Bigfoot forum or sub. What are they called? Subreddits on Reddit.
Yeah.
Okay. The Bigfoot subreddit on Reddit. It's not, you know, what is that? Reddit After Dark or Reddit? I forget what it's called for the fiction stories. That's not where this is from.
No Sleep. There's like scary.
No Sleep. Right.
Yeah, No Sleep's I think the big one. Like you'll see a lot of videos and whatnot. They're like No Sleep stories. Like it's a trending. You know, it's a popular hashtag.
Right.
Fictional stuff.
Yeah. Well, I mean, yeah. There's no way to, you know, we can't totally substantiate this or any of these accounts really, but when you start to hear how many people are talking about it or how many people and how many accounts there really are, it really makes you start to wonder.
It really is crazy. There's a shit ton.
Yeah, I had no idea.
fuck ton of reports.
Especially from Connecticut. No, I'm kidding.